Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, a neighbor tried to steal my land by moving a shared fence. I taught her a lesson she would never forget. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. I've been quite lucky for most of my life in terms of not having any nightmare neighbors. In fact, for a while, I thought people were just exaggerating and that there was no way that anybody would behave in those ways. Well, that was until I moved into my current home just over a year ago. It is a lovely neighborhood and kid-friendly, which is why me and my wife moved here, hoping to one day start a family and raise our children here. I remember the day we toured the house, some of the neighbors from across the road came over to say hello, which was lovely, and the same people greeted us again when we officially moved in. So from those impressions we had a great feeling about this place. Months after we had moved in, our neighbor to the left had yet to greet us. We had not really noticed as we were so busy unpacking and stressing over our new jobs in the area, but eventually we clocked on and brought it up to one of our other neighbors when we were around for a meal. "Oh, that won't be nothing," our neighbor replied after my wife had called it just that. "Why not?" she asked. Our neighbor sighed. "She's not the most liked around here. Never has been. Just looks down her nose at everyone, to put it one way." "Oh, do you think she will cause any problems?" my wife asked, skeptical. "Well, I don't know, to be honest. I'm surprised you haven't already been given the rundown about her. She has chased away the last few tenants where you were living." Me and my wife looked towards one another in worry. "Why do you think she has not greeted us?" "Well, hopefully it's because you've not done anything wrong in her eyes, so she has no reason to speak to you. Or she is stewing in anger over something and refuses to talk to you because of it. We think she assumes everyone around here is plotting against her or something, no other reason for her to act so scornful towards us." "Well, fingers crossed it's the first one," I muttered as we moved on to a different conversation. My wife was a nervous wreck after that conversation. She hates confrontation and the idea of it always makes me angry. I even began feeling a little anger for our neighbor who had spoken to us, wondering if it was necessary to worry us like that. However, the following week I realized it definitely was. It was 4 in the morning on a Saturday when we heard banging at our door. Obviously, it scared us awake and we raced over, peering through the keyhole. We saw a woman we didn't know, middle-aged and wearing an angry mask of irritation on her face. "Hello?" I asked through the door, not wanting to open it to whatever wrath this stranger was about to bring. "Open the door," she yelled back, stomping her feet after each word. Me and my wife looked at each other like we just figured out who she was. "Who are you?" we asked anyway. "Huh, as if you don't know who I am. This is my neighborhood." "You're the mayor?" my wife asked innocently. I love that woman. Obviously, that was not the right thing to say, however, as the woman took it sarcastically. She was silent for a few moments before banging heavily on the door. "Don't be so cheeky with me. I'm your neighbor, you know, the one you haven't bothered to say hello to." "Oh, sorry about that, we've just been very busy and…" my wife began. "Shut up, I don't want to hear your nasally voice. I have a few problems with you too," the woman responded. "Firstly," I suddenly yanked open the door and enjoyed watching as the woman got startled. "Don't speak to my wife that way. Second, you don't even know us. What gives you the right to have a problem with us?" The woman's face was quickly back to anger as she stared up at me with a scowl. "Your car is parked on my driveway. Your fence needs replacing. Your garden is a mess. Sort it out. Okay, stop," I interrupted. "Your garden is more of a mess than ours, so I really don't know what the deal is. And what fence and why?" "The fence around the back where our gardens connect," she rolled her eyes. "It's too close to my property. It should be further in towards your house." "Why? It's there to show which land we own." "Nope, it's incorrect. I own more of the land that we share and the fence needs moving." "Not going to happen. We didn't put that fence there. It must have been here for years. Why haven't you raised this problem with past residents?" "Well, I have, but they're all just as stubborn as you." Me and my wife shared a look. I couldn't even believe this was how we were first meeting her. "Well, feel free to get a property surveyor in to have a look." The woman looked like she was going to retort once more, but my wife beat her to it. "And our car is not on your driveway," she said quietly, again not comfortable with the confrontation. The woman turned around and waved her hand at our car, which was neatly parked in front of our house. "Once again, I own more of this land than you, and that space is mine." "The area directly in front of our house is yours?" I asked incredulously. "Yes, again, the fencing is wrong." "Well, I guess you should just call around a property surveyor," I replied and made move to shut the door when she stuck her foot in the gap. "I've already done that, you idiot. Why do you think I haven't managed to get the fence moved before?" So let me get this straight. You've had a professional comment tell you that you are wrong and you still think you are right? I replied, smiling and slamming the door once she moved her foot, although part of me wishes she hadn't. We heard her yelling through the door for ages, shouting all sorts of horrible things that I don't want to write down on here. She banged and shouted at the door for hours, easily until 6 in the morning. Eventually though, other neighbors came over and started asking what was going on here. And as they are all not so keen on the woman, they sided with us and argued with her to the point when she stormed off. We invited said neighbors in because who doesn't love a good rant? So that is what we all did for the next few hours, which seemed to help my wife as it confirmed it wasn't just us that would be dealing with her. We explained to them what had happened and what she had been claiming about the fence, etc., which is when they explained that she did the exact same thing to the previous neighbors. She had gone wrong kicking and screaming, claiming they had stolen some of her land, demanding they move the fence that is still there today. She then got a property surveyor who looked at the deeds and did the measurements, confirming that the fence was actually in the right place. In fact, it was slightly too far towards their house. In other words, this woman had more land than she should. The people she was trying to screw over didn't even move the fence towards her, deciding to just let it go. Even as the woman kept trying to claim it should be moved and that the surveyor was wrong. Anyway, these neighbors ended up moving out, sick of all the abuse coming from the woman who, by the way, we learned was called Karen. So Karen chose to not do anything about the fence the whole time the house was unoccupied, deciding to wait until we had moved in to bring up the topic. That was when we found out that she had Facebook, and wow, was it entertaining. Her posts were constant, almost a few an hour some days, each one defaming someone in the neighborhood or just trash talking in general. Obviously, her comments are filled with people disagreeing, and it seems if she is not arguing in real life, she is doing so online. We scrolled back and saw that she had made a post the day we moved in. She captioned it with the following: "Scruffs just moved in next door. Young couple here to make a noise and ruin the neighborhood." We were shocked that she had written that, the others weren't. They also said they rarely check her account anyway, hence why nobody had told us about it. We just laughed it off, but of course it did leave a bit of a sour feeling behind. It was just rude. However, one thing which Karen had never done was try to move the fence herself. So we assumed she would never do this, but spoiler alert, we were wrong. Karen did not make another appearance for weeks, and from the looks of her Facebook, she had decided to just start trash talking us online. Of course, nobody was siding with her, so we were not at all worried about our reputation or anything. If anything, we preferred it to her waking us up at 4 AM to complain about her problems. Where things took a turn was when we went on holiday, and I bet you can guess what happened the moment we took the flight. The holiday was great, and we forgot most of our issues with Karen until 2 weeks later when we arrived back home in the taxi. At first we didn't notice as we were tired and just wanted to get our luggage inside and collapse. But then a few hours later when I took the bins out, I saw that the fence had been moved. It was done poorly as well, so it was not hard to guess it was done by Karen herself. One of my other neighbors came over seeing me outside. "We tried to stop her," he explained as he shook his head. "It's alright, it's not your problem to solve, but thanks for trying." The fence was now flush against our house and had been looped around our driveway so that it was now fully on her side. Our car, still being in the driveway, was also now on her side, so I was not sure what she was thinking when she did that. I walked over to her house, wishing none of this was happening. "Karen, why have you moved the fence?" I asked as the door opened. "Because it was in the wrong place. I've already told you that I own more of the land." She shrugged and made move to shut the door. I stopped it with my foot, just as she had done. "This conversation is not over. You don't own that land. The property surveyor has even told you so in the past. Where have you gotten this idea from?" "I just know I own more of it. I paid a lot for this house, so why would I not own all the land surrounding?" "Because your neighbor also paid a lot for their house, and in the deeds and descriptions when you bought yours, I'm sure it would have given the exact dimensions of which you owned. You're making problems for the sake of it at this point." "How rude, I'm most certainly not, and I can assure you that is my land." She spat, actually spat on my shoes. She then went on to say some more nasty things, most of them about my wife. Again, I'm not gonna write them down, but some of the end comments she spat out made me see red. I walked away, not even bothering to reply, as she continued screaming her abuse. I also saw one of my neighbors filming, and Karen then stormed over to give them a piece of her mind. Walking inside, I googled for the nearest property surveyor, ringing them up and making an appointment for later that day. They came over and I explained the situation, and off they went. They looked over my deeds, the online copy of Karen's, and measured our lands. Karen came out claiming we had no right to be measuring her property and whatever else she thought up. The surveyor showed her some sort of government-issued document which stated that we did have the rights, and they just ignored her as she continued screaming the following. "You cannot do this! Get off my property! You're trespassing! I will call the cops!" she yelled, following them around. Go for it, I'm just doing my job. Yeah, why don't you ring the cops, Karen? I'm sure they'll be needed once you're told you were wrong and will need to move the fence. I drawled from where I stood on my porch. She screamed, "You! How could you do this? What have I ever done to you?" I sighed and gestured to the fence. "Did this move on its own?" I asked. She turned red. "You're a disgusting human being. I have the rights to this land and you most certainly don't." Well, nope, it is his land. In fact, where the original fencing was, it's wrong, but in the other direction. Confirming what the other neighbors said. So actually, we will have someone move it to the correct position in a few hours. "No!" Karen screamed. "I don't give you permission to do that." The surveyor shrugged and got in his car, making a quick call to have someone sent over before driving off to leave Karen seething in her spot. Within the hour, someone came over and began moving the fence to be the surveyor's dimensions. Karen was fuming the entire time, watching as the fence was moved further towards her house than before. Smoke was practically pouring out of her ears when they were done. "You cannot do this! This is not fair!" she screamed, pointing at me, to which I shrugged. "Oh, so you're able to move our fence unjustly, but we cannot move it even when we have the right to do so?" Karen carried on, ranting and crying and throwing a hissy fit, and across the way, the neighbor was once again filming. He ended up walking over and showing me the video of her throwing a tantrum the other day as well, so while she carried on shouting, we uploaded the videos to Facebook and tagged her. Mean, I know, but we thought it was rightly warranted for how she had been acting. Obviously, this got her even angrier, but it seemed to do the trick in showing her not to mess with us, as she left us alone after that for months, and so far so good. She keeps to herself and we don't bother her, but we do enjoy our extra bit of land. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you're trying to steal land from your neighbor, then you better make sure that they are not gonna call a surveyor on you and take their land and some of yours back in return. This Karen got exactly what she deserved, and if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is a malicious compliance story. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for daily content. So this happened last year. I, female 31, was 1 week away from my due date and was working full-time in a school administration position. At this time, I had the capability to work from home if needed, for example, too sick to come into work, catch up on extra work, unable to secure daycare for my child, etc. When I accepted the position prior to my pregnancy, I was told by my boss, let's call her Ronnie, that it was very flexible as long as I got my hours in. I very rarely worked from home and typically only did so for an hour or two in the morning if it was needed later on in order to work before OB/GYN appointments, as it was a long commute between work and home/doctor's office. However, I was told by Ronnie after accepting the position to try and limit work from home to 2 days a month, which, fine, at this point I was well under, since I was only working an hour or two, maybe twice a month, and only once a month before that. Being so close to my due date, I was experiencing physical hardships that made working on site more and more difficult, such as dizzy spells, a pulled tendon in my foot, and severe back pain. I was also scared of potentially going into labor while at work, with it being so far away from the hospital my OB/GYN delivers at. To top it all off, my coworkers started asking more invasive questions about my pregnancy that made me uncomfortable. All in all, it was not a fun time. I explained all of this in an email to Ronnie and asked for her permission to almost exclusively work from home up until I go into labor. I said I thought it would be a reasonable accommodation and I work really well from home. Ronnie responded a couple days later denying my request to work from home at all and said I needed to be there since we would be starting some of our busiest work in a couple months, which I would be gone for on a maternity leave anyway, so I'm not sure why she even brought it up, but I could talk to HR about leave options if I'm truly having trouble working. By the way, it's illegal in my state to require an employee to take leave if there's a reasonable accommodation that can be made instead. Cue malicious compliance. I immediately went to HR and did just that. We talked about options and found out I could start my leave the very next day and still be paid state mandatory leave pay for the extra time. I informed Ronnie that I would be out starting the next day as I needed to take care of myself. She said, "I understand you need to do what's best for you, but you need to understand that I need to do what's best for the team." So yeah, everything I normally managed basically went to crap in my absence as the other people on the team were not qualified to do the work and kept taking time off leading up to my due date instead of learning the basics while I was still there to teach them. I left detailed procedure notes and workflow lists, but I later found out that Ronnie had to pick up all the extra work and a lot of it never got done since she did not have time. But it was best for the team, right boss? And the next one is a petty revenge story. This was a while ago and I'm over him now, but about 2 years ago I dated a coworker. I know now that was a mistake, I was barely in my 20s when this happened. We started as friends and hung in the same circles until we couldn't deny the attraction anymore. A couple months into dating, we were planning on moving in together and maybe even getting married one day. We were inseparable and he was so affectionate with his words and actions. But then I got a promotion that required me to go out of state. We decided to do long distance for a while and I would keep a lot of my stuff at his place until I moved back. Then we would live together. Unfortunately, a month into long distance, he ghosted me. There was no indication that things were going wrong, so I was devastated and blindsided. I had never been in a relationship before, so he was my first heartbreak, but the most annoying part was that he refused to acknowledge my existence even as just friends. We were in similar group chats and he would just skip over my comments, he would go out of town when I came in town, and he would get mad at me for hanging out with our mutual friends. I found this out through the grapevine, but it was one of the few things I knew about him after the breakup. Eventually I moved on and met someone new, but I was still very hurt that someone I once considered a great friend would just cut me out of my life for no reason. So here's where the petty revenge comes from. We have a company homepage that shows different slides of employees doing things like receiving awards or even special events. The homepage plays in the TV screens at work as well as the computers. One day the company sent an email asking for pictures with a prompt, so I chose the pretty picture of myself I could find and a nice fluffy paragraph to go with it. Now the ex that ghosted me has to see my face every time he walks into work and opens up his computer. A revenge a year in the making. Edit: when I said I met someone new that was later down the road, I'm not with the someone new anymore. Sorry for the confusion. The revenge and the dating a new person did not happen at the same time, of course. And the next one is another malicious compliance story. I, 33 female, unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, the baby and I are doing great and we have now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant the baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa, aka an ICU. Now that we are home and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped bring some levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially preemies, is skin-to-skin time, which is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. My baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the NICU, right next to another baby and across from 2 others. A standard of care in the NICU is monitoring the baby's breathing, heart rate and oxygen levels. These monitors look like an old-school tube TV and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches and can display babies in other areas as well if the nurses need. So I'm new to this little care area and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital-provided screen so I can get my skin-to-skin time, but realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. So then I asked the nurse if she can still see or if my setup was blocking anything for her. Obviously, I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything was good, so I settle in for some much needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel someone in my space and look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, Karen starts in on me while topless and holding the baby, so very vulnerable, about how I am blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I try to explain I ask before saying things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture and gets more aggressive and angry about how I am causing her baby not to receive appropriate care and that I am pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional stress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped, looked at the nurse and told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, "It would seem my privacy and modesty don't matter as much as Karen's comfort. Get rid of the screen." This pissed off Karen even more as she realized she would have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She got very annoyed and uncomfortable, especially when the doctors managing rounds and both got flustered and tried to insist I get a new screen. I may have been the a-hole, but I simply was done and stared right back and said, "According to my new neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable." When I tell you if looks could kill, I'd be dead, I'm not joking. The doctors didn't want to deal with it and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all her baby's stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time she freaked out about this, but she pulled the same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby, until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everyone to look at my boobs is probably gonna make me giggle every time I think of it. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.